Hello and welcome to Nirmal, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hiral Dadia. We have with us Aditi Nayar, Chief Economist at ICRA, joining in. Welcome to the show, Aditi, and always a pleasure to speak to you and get insights from you.
Thanks, Hiral.
Aditi, my first question coming to you is, what is the focus, according to you, of the budget going to be? And do you think it will be a populist one?
See, what we believe is that this budget needs to focus spending in areas that can give us the most durable growth going forward. We're at a very interesting stage right now. Globally, inflation is no longer transitory. That's very clear. Indian inflation is also on the higher side. Although we have the advantage of an inflation target that's much higher than what most of the other big central banks have to deal with. But it's clear that at some point we now need to shift focus to targeting inflation, and that's what the MPC is likely to do going ahead. So for the budget itself, we believe that the focus needs to be creating as much bang for the buck, focus spending where it's going to have the best multiplier, and that we believe is through infrastructure and capital spending. So the theme that we've got from our side for the budget this year is that it should ring fence the capital spending that can realistically be absorbed this year. Now we're working with a number of 50,000 crore per month. That's just 6 lakh crore for the full year, but we believe that that's the bare minimum that needs to be put in for capex in this year's budget. If we take away the amount of money that is likely to be infused as equity into Air India, it's still going to give us a very decent growth over FY22. So that's the starting point. After that, how is this going to get financed? One, of course, a continued look at rationalizing of centrally sponsored schemes. That's been a work in progress for a long time, and we believe that work will continue on that front. Other than that, when we look at the social sector spending, our belief is that the budget must be presented and prepared on the basis of the assumption that next year is going to be a relatively normal year. If in the middle of the year circumstances develop in such a way that we have a moderate to severe fourth wave, then the government can always make money available at that time for social sector spending, such as free food grade. That's been the go-to in the last couple of years, and it can always be announced mid-year when it's required. And secondly, amping up the amount of money required for NREGA. So we believe that at the outset, the budget should assume it's going to be a normal year and provide normal amounts of money for the food subsidy, which is what's required under the Food Security Act, and a normal amount of money for NREGA. Not assume that free food grain will be required, or that there will be a high pressure on NREGA and account for the allocation accordingly.
Right. So taking all of this into consideration, do you think we will be able to retain the thrust with regards to capex related spending to support growth?
I think that's what the focus needs to be, because we really need to now get to a point where at least first of all make the money available, and then really drive that capex thrust through the year, because that's what's going to create a more durable growth and really bring about job creation and a better multiplier. Now, as far as the private sector capex is concerned, we think that capex announcements are happening by the private sector in select areas, PLI schemes, cement, steel, but it's not broad-based, and we don't think it will become broad-based until much later in 2022. So the threshold of 75%, which needs to get crossed before we start seeing very broad-based reached until much later in 2022. Therefore, the government of India must step in with a higher capex announcement, and also ensure that it starts getting spent early on in the year and not get back-ended toward the later part of the year. If I remember correctly, so 50,000 crore per month is the number that we're working with. And if I remember correctly, we've only crossed this threshold 4 times since 2019. So this is definitely something that we need to, enhance. What is the monthly spend that's happening on the capex side?
Right. And overall, if you see in terms of where the key area that we need to focus on is also in terms of the national monetization pipeline, besides incentivizing states to prioritize capex. What's your view on the divestment target?
See, we work with the assumption that the LIC divestment, although the government is trying to conclude it in this year, we work with a base assumption that it's actually going to get spilled over to the next fiscal year.
Hmm.
So based on that, we're looking at a fiscal deficit of 16.6 trillion this year and coming down to 15.2 trillion next year, assuming that the LIC money comes through.
Hmm.
Even if we have a moderate to severe wave, I have no doubt that LIC will get concluded next year because we've got a full year left. Most of the prep work has been done, etc.
Hmm.
Other disinvestment could be slightly hit, but not LIC. So we're looking at Government of India's fiscal deficit coming down from 7.1% of GDP this year to
Hmm.
5.8% of GDP next year.
Okay. And what's the kind of gross borrowings that we are penciling in?
So for this year, we are looking at a gross borrowing of 13 trillion for Government of India. And in the base case for next year, we're looking at it being pretty flat at 12.9 trillion. And in the adverse case, if we do have a moderate to severe fourth wave and we need to spend extra money on free food grain and on the Rega, modest hit to the indirect taxes as well as modest hit to disinvestment, then in that case, we're looking at the Government of India gross borrowings going up to 14.6 trillion. But that's as I said, that's not our base case assumption. For the state governments, they have a big cliff that's coming up, which is the end of the GST compensation regime. GST compensation is meant to be paid to the states until the end of June 2022. That's as per the original 5-year transition program. And on a cash flow basis, there's some pending dues that we understand that Government of India has indicated. And the dues for February to June on a normal cash flow basis will get paid next year. So we've got
Right.
5 months of normal dues coming in FY23 and whatever pending dues may be there.
Right.
And the total amount coming down from about 2.6 to 2.7 trillion in FY22 to about 1.2 to 1.5 trillion in FY23, which is likely to make the state governments go up to their fiscal deficit cap of 3.5% of GSDP. And this is something that will push up their borrowings next year as compared to the current year.
Right. So with all of this, another aspect, Aditi, we need to consider is in terms of credit growth. Are we expecting a pickup in terms of credit growth? If yes, what are the targets we're looking at in terms of FY23? And if there is a pickup, do you see that the bank investments in GSEC and the state development loans is something which could slow down?
Yes. See, on the capex side, we're looking at working capital requirements going up. We're also looking at a back-ended pickup in investment by India Inc. And this is something that will push up credit growth. As far as banks are concerned, they're already sitting on a significant amount of excess SLR. And therefore, their appetite for incremental GSEC and SDL may go down next year. RBI is also likely to move into a different mode as far as liquidity management is concerned. And therefore, the demand for government paper is definitely going to be on the lower side next year from these two sources. That makes it more, urgent for the bond index inclusion to happen. Because if it does, it's going to open up another avenue of demand for Indian government paper, and therefore try to help to keep a lid on yields. We've already seen the yields going up very sharply ever since the Fed came out with clearer guidance on what they want to do this year. And it's just a matter of time before the FPC starts hiking rates as well. February, we expect a status quo because there is some amount of uncertainty which is still there. But it's possibly now looking more likely that we'll embark on policy normalization in April with a change in stance. And we're looking at 2 repo hikes after that in the subsequent 2 policies. So rates are going up globally. They will go up in India as well. If the bond index inclusion happens soon, then at least it'll keep a lid on yields. Otherwise, we're expecting the 10-year GSEC to go up to about 7% within a quarter.
Right. And with this, then, can we expect yields in that range of 6.75 to 7% trading range in FY23? And secondly, will the RBI's focus on growth and the need to ensure orderly completion of the government's borrowing program also provide a backstop for the yields?
Well, I think the focus will be a little more on the inflation management in the coming year. Our early forecasts are suggesting that the CPI inflation average will come down from 5.5% this year, very modestly to about 5% next year. But we see clear upsides to this
Hmm.
forecast. We do think that in a lot of sectors, uh, more price hikes are likely to be introduced after demand settles down and after the third wave sort of eases. And because of that, we do think that the focus itself is going to be far more on inflation management next year rather than supporting growth and ensuring an orderly evolution of the yield curve. Uh, FY23 is going to be a different looking year from FY21 and FY22. Everybody is better prepared to deal with future waves of the pandemic if and when they may arise. And therefore, I think inflation now is going to be a much bigger concern in terms of policy focus than what it's been in the last 2 years.
Right. And overall, in terms of where the rural allocation goes, do you think that is something the spends could actually moderate from here on?
See, on the rural, I don't expect the spends to moderate because there's a couple of things which will remain on the higher side. For example, fertilizer subsidy, because the way that global commodity prices have moved, fertilizer subsidy requirement has been very high in FY22 and it's likely to remain very high in FY23 as well. Whether it's entirely allocated upfront or if we go to a wait and watch mode and step up the amount later in the supplementary, that's something that remains to be seen. But that is something that is going to be one challenge. Narega I already talked about. PM Kisan and other major outlays, I believe, will continue. So I don't see a large step down in the rural allocation. The only thing that we're seeing, expecting a large step down is the total food subsidy allocation, because free food itself was a large chunk of the spend this year. And that we at least expect, we don't expect it to be included in the budget, but we provide it as and when required through a supplementary in the middle of the year.
Right. And very lastly, Aditi, in terms of the key aspects that we need to watch out for, what should they be from budget 2022?
From the coming budget, basically we need to see how much of a durable growth push the budget is able to present. So first of course, what I'll be looking for in order, what is the capex number? After that, what is the level of fiscal consolidation that's being targeted? What kind of medium term numbers are being put forth? How much is the borrowing ceiling that the states are being allowed for FY23? Is there a sub clause within that for capex, or is it just an open-ended borrowing limit for the state governments? I think that's going to be important as well. On the state side, just want to point out one more thing. Our belief is that in FY23, the gross tax revenue growth of Government of India is going to be constrained by the fact that excise flows are going to contract. We've got the overhang of the fuel tax cuts that were announced in November, but that's not shared with the states. And because it's not shared with the states, their tax devolution growth will actually be in double digits. It will be in mid double digits in FY23. And that's going to offset a little bit of the GST compensation related concerns that I was talking about earlier. And hopefully that will help to them also to maintain a focus on capex, so that the center and the states really pick up the mantle on the growth side, and that sets the stage for the MPC to be able to move the focus to inflation control.
Right. So key things that we should be watching out for as well. Thank you, Aditi, so much for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure to speak to you and get insights. Thank you. Stay safe and speak to you soon again.
Bye.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel for in-depth interviews of India Inc. and press the bell icon so that you do not miss our updates.